you've been. That's okay. But it's nice. That's the last time I saw you.
Same. She brought me home, and then I just sat around watching TV.
I kept trying to read the Dr. Half while we're done here, but
Okay, well, welcome to Ghost Stories Live, everybody. This is your host, Pugsley the Fiendly Ghost. He's the permanent host of the show. Tonight we have myself, who is a regular cast member, Russell Atwood. We have special guest, Tom Deady. And hopefully we have some other people coming in a little later. My sister may come in and read something. Susan Buffum is elsewhere, but being Susan, she's sent in a few things, so I'm going to try my best to be Susan for her segments of the show. And then we're doing a very special today. We are celebrating Stephen King's birthday. Yes. So thank you all for coming for that. You all get to take a red balloon, by the way. Yes. Good one, you get one. Yeah, there we go. There's some more in the back of the window and stuff too.
I'll go around town and say him to the.
Let's see.
My college did that one year. I was scared.
It's warmed up for you. Here's my little rendition of. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from Stephen King's short story. It's called Night Shift. And this is all this stuff is pretty long, but this one's from a thing called Jerusalem's Lot. And it's told, it's a form of storytelling called epistolary, which is letters told in the form, stories told in the form of letters that are communicated to somebody. And so this is this man who inherits a family mansion that's more than haunted, it's cursed. And he's a modern man, but this is all set back in 1850. But even back then he thought he was a very modern man. So he was talking to local people, and so he talks to the woman who cleans his house, and her name is Mrs. Cloris. And so he asks her, matter-of-factly, and what do you suspect, Mrs. Cloris? Ghosts rattling the chains? But she only looked at me oddly. Ghosts there may be, but it's not ghosts in the walls. It's not ghosts that wail and blubber like the damned and crash and blunder away in the darkness. It's... Oh, Mrs. Cloris, I prompted her. You've come this far, now you can finish what you've begun. The strangest expression of terror, pique, and I would swear to it, religious awe passed over her face. Some die not, she whispered. Some live in the twilight shadows between to serve him. And that was the end. For some minutes I continued to tax her, but she grew only more obstinate and would say no more. And at last I desisted, fearing she might gather herself up and quit the premises. And then later that night, he has a servant named Calvin. And Calvin wakes him up in the middle of the night and says, you have to come to the library with me. I was reading a book in the upstairs study, sir, a rather strange one, when I heard a noise in the wall. Rats, I said. Is that all? He paused on the landing, looking at me solemnly. The lamp he held cast weird, lurking shadows in the dark draperies, and on the half-seen portraits that seemed now to leer rather than smile. Outside, the wind rose to a brief scream and then subsided grudgingly. Not rats, Cal said. There was a kind of blundering, thudding sound from behind the bookcases, and then a horrible gurgling, horrible, sir, and scratching as if something were struggling to get out, to get at me. You can imagine my amazement. Calvin is not the type to give way to hysterical flights of imagination. It began to seem that there was a mystery here after all, and perhaps an ugly one indeed. What then, I asked him, as we resumed the hall. The scratching noise stopped. After a moment, the thudding, shuffling sounds began again, this time moving away from me. I paused once, and I swear I heard a strange, almost inaudible laugh. I went to the bookcase and began to push and pull, thinking there might be a partition or a secret door. You found one? Hal paused at the door of the study. No, but I found this. This is this accursed book. We stepped in and I saw a square black hole in the left case. The books at that point were nothing but dummies, and what Cal had found was a small hiding place. I flashed my lamp within it and saw nothing but a thick fall of dust. Dust which must have been decades old. There was only this. The thing was a map. There were perhaps 7 buildings, and one clearly marked, with a steeple that bore the legend beneath it. The worm that doth corrupt. Chapel. So they live near a very accursed town that's been abandoned because a terrible curse has fallen upon it. But they finally do track down what the noises are involved. Developments of a disquieting nature. Noises in the house have intensified, and I'm growing more to the conclusion that rats are not all that move within our walls. Calvin and I went on another fruitless search for hidden crannies or passages but found nothing. How poorly we would fit into some adventure novel. But they do finally find their way in. So here we go. As I had, I shall never be myself again, never. I have come face to face with an insanity and a horror beyond the limits of human expression, and the end is not yet. If it were not for my servant Cal, I believe I should end my life this minute. He is one island of sanity in all this madness. You shall know it all. We had equipped ourselves with candles for our cellar exploration, and they threw a strong glow that was quite adequate, hellishly adequate. Calvin tried to dissuade me, citing my recent illness, saying that the most we should probably find would be some healthy rats to mark for a poison. I remained determined, however. Calvin fetched a sigh and answered, "Have it as you must, Mr. Boone. The entrance to the cellar is by means of a trap in the kitchen floor, which Cal assures me he has since stopped the corridor. And we raise it only with a great deal of straining and lifting. A potent, overpowering smell came up out of the darkness, not unlike that which pervaded the deserted town across Royal River. The candle I held shed its glow on a steeply slanting flight of stairs leading down into darkness. They were in a terrible state of repair. In one place, an entire riser missing, leaving only a black hole, and it was easy enough to see how the unfortunate Marcella, my ancestress, might have come to her end there. "Be careful, Mr. Boone," Cal said. I told him I had no intention of being anything but, and we made the descent. The floor was earthen, the walls of stout granite and hardly wet. The place did not look like a rat haven at all, for there was none of the things rat-like to make their nests in, such as old boxes, discarded furniture, piles of paper, and the like. We lifted our candles, gaining a small circle of light, but still unable to see but little. The floor had a gradual slope which seemed to run beneath the main living room and the dining room to the west. It was in this direction we walked. All was in utter silence. The stench in the air grew steadily stronger. The dark about us seemed to press like wool, as if jealous of the light which had temporarily disposed it after so many years of undisputed dominion. At the far end, the granite walls gave way to a polished wood which seemed totally black and without reflective properties. Here the cellar ended, leaving what seemed to be an alcove off the main chamber. It was positioned at an angle which made inspection impossible without stepping around the corner. Calvin and I did so. It was as if a rotten specter of this dwelling sinister passed, past had risen before us. A single stair stood in the alcove, and above it, fastened from a hook in one of the stout overhead beams, was the decayed use of hemp. "Then this is where he hung himself," Cal muttered. "God, yes," with the corpse of his daughter lying at the foot of the stairs behind him. Cal began to speak, and I saw his eyes jerk to a spot behind me. Then his words became a scream. How, Bones, can I describe the sight which fell upon our eyes? How can I tell you the hideous tenants within our walls? The far wall swung back, and from that darkness a face leered, a face with eyes as ebon as the Styx itself. Its mouth yawned in a toothless, agonized grin. One yellow, rotted hand stretched itself out to us. It made a hideous mewling sound and took a shambling step forward. The light from my candle fell upon it, and I saw the livid rope burn about its neck. From beyond it, something else moved, something I shall dream of until the day when all dreams cease. A girl with a pallid, moldering face and a corpse grin. A girl whose head lolled at a lunatic angle. They wanted us, I know it, and I know they would have drawn us into that darkness and made us their own, had I not thrown my candle directly at the thing in the partition and followed it with a chair beneath that noose. After that, all is confused darkness. My mind has drawn a curtain. I woke, as I have said, in my room with Cal at my side. But that's the end of that. Until they have to finally confront what's in the ruined chapel at the end of Jerusalem's lot. But that's all for now. But yeah, so anyway, thank you for that part. That is Stephen King. It's like a very serious story, Jerusalem lot. Tom, are you prepared to step in with your contribution? I believe you another
I do.
And this is, we welcome Tom Deady. He is the author of Maiden, Woody Heatherway, and a great friend of the bookstore. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to be reading from Bag of Bones, which is a great Stephen King ghost story. Just to set up the scene, the main premise of the book is the main character is a writer, shocking in a Stephen King book, I know, whose wife dies suddenly at a young age. Joanna is her name. He is impacted with writer's block after the death of his wife and goes up to his summer home to try and get through it. The name of the summer home is Sarah Labs, and it was the former home of an old blues singer named Sarah Tidwell, who died many years before at the house, and she is just one of the many ghosts in the story. It was the last dream I had in what I now think of as my Manderley series, the culminating dream. It was made even worse, I suppose, by the unrelievable blackness through which I awoke. It started like the others. I'm walking up the lane, listening to the crickets and the loons, looking mostly at the darkening spot of sky overhead. I reach the driveway and hear something has changed. Someone has put a little sticker on the Sarah Labs sign. I lean closer and see it's a radio sticker. WBLM, it says, 102.9, Portland's rock and roll blimp. From the sticker, I look back up into the sky, and there is Venus. I wish on her, as I always do. I wish for Joanna, with the dank and vaguely tremendous smell of the lake in my nose. Something lumbers in the woods, rattling old leaves and breaking a branch. It sounds big. Better get down there, a voice in my head tells me. Something is taking out a contract on you, Michael. A 3-book contract, and that's the worst kind. I can't move. I can never move. I can only stand here. I've got walkers to walk. But that's just talk. I can walk. This time I can walk. I'm delighted. I've had a major breakthrough. In the dream, I think, this changes everything. This changes everything. Down the driveway I walk, deeper and deeper into the clean but sour smell of pine, stepping over some of the fallen branches, kicking others out of the way. I raise my hand to brush the damp hair off my forehead and see the little scratch running across the back of it. I stop to look at it, curious. No time for that, the dreamy voice says. Get down there. You've got a book to write. I can't write, I reply. That part's over. I'm on the back 40 now. No, the voice says. There's something relentless about it that scares me. You had writer's block, not writer's block. And as you can see, it's gone. Now hurry up and get down there. I'm afraid, I told the voice. Afraid of what? Well, what if Mrs. Danvers is down there? The voice doesn't answer. It knows I'm not afraid of Rebecca DeWinter's housekeeper. She's just a character in an old book. Nothing but a bag of bones. So I begin walking again. I have no choice, it seems, but at every step my terror increases. And by the time I'm halfway down to the shadowy, sprawling bulk of the log house, fear has sunk into my bones like fever. Something is wrong here. Something is all twisted up. I'll run away, I think. I'll run back the way I came, like a gingerbread man. I'll run all the way back to Derry, if that's what it takes, and I'll never come here anymore. Except I can hear smothering breath behind me in the growing gloom, and padding footsteps. The thing in the woods is behind me now. The thing in the woods is now the thing in the driveway. It's right behind me. If I turn around, the sight of it will knock the sanity out of my head in a single roundhouse slap. Something with red eyes, something slumped and hungry. The house is my only hope for safety. I walk on. The crowding bushes clutch like hands in the light of a rising moon. The moon has never risen before in this dream, but I have never stayed in it this long before. The rustling leaves look like sardonic faces. I see winking eyes and smiling mouths. Below me are the black windows of the house, and I know that there will be no power when I get inside. The storm has knocked the power out. I will flick the light switch up and down, until something reaches out and takes my wrist and pulls me like a lover deep into the dark. I'm 3/4 of the way down the driveway now. I can see the railroad tie steps leading down to the lake. And I can see the float out there in the water, a black square in a track of moonlight. Bill Dean has put it out. I can also see an oblong something lying at the place where the driveway ends in the stoop. There has never been such an object before. What can it be? Another 2 or 3 steps, and I know. It's a coffin. The one Frank Ireland diggers for, because, he said, the mortician was trying to stick it to me. It's Joe's coffin, and lying on its side with the top partway open, enough for me to see it's empty. I think I want to scream. I think I mean to turn around and run back up the driveway. I'll take my chances with the thing behind me, but before I can, the back door of Sarah Lapp's opens, and a terrible figure comes darting out into the growing darkness. It is human, this figure, and yet it's not. It is a crumpled white thing with baggy arms upraised. There's no face where its face should be, and yet it is shrieking in a blotto, loon-like voice. It must be Joanna. She was able to escape her coffin, but not her winding shroud. She's all tangled up in it. How hideously speedy this creature is. It doesn't drift as one imagines ghosts drifting, but races across the stoop toward the driveway. It has been waiting down here during all the dreams when I had been frozen. And now that I've finally been able to walk down, it needs to have me. I'll scream when it wraps me in its silk arms, and I will scream when I smell its rotting, blood-raddled flesh and see its dark, staring eyes through the fine purple cloth. I will scream as the sanity leaves my mind forever. I will scream, but there was no one out here to hear me. Only loons will hear me. I have come again to Mandalay, and this time I will never leave. The shrieking white thing reached for me, and I woke up on the floor of my bed, crying out in a cracked, horrified voice, and slamming my head repeatedly against something.
Slumbering things, and yeah, both our things have come up. So Susan Buffum couldn't be here also. Pugsley to actually do the introductions here. Susan Buffum, who can't be here today, is always also a talented writer, but also a very good artist. And so she's kind of combined both of those things with this new thing she's doing for Halloween, which are monster prints. And so I'll read her things and show you the prints. The first one is the mummy. So it'll actually look like I'm the mummy, I guess. The prince's handsome face was ruined in a chariot accident. his body broken and mangled beneath the hooves of horses and unforgiving wheels. Yet he was carefully prepared and bandaged by the priest. The bandage is the only thing holding him together. Placed in a sarcophagus adorned with gold leaf, lapis lazuli, carnelian, and agate, he was interred in the bowels of a hastily excavated tomb among an array of goods that would be useful to him in the afterlife. In their haste, all the priest's eternal organs were stuffed haphazardly back into his empty body cavity, or were they? Only after the tomb had been sealed did they find his heart that had fallen beneath the table upon which he had been prepared. And now, 23 years past the turn of the 20th century A.D., a shadowy form emerges from the gaping mouth of the excavation, lurching and stumbling toward the campfires in the distance, where archaeologists dream of golden treasures encrusted with precious gemstones and jewels. They cannot begin to comprehend the danger they are in as the prince shambles toward them. For unbeknownst to them, they have among the artifacts removed from a shallow minor tomb nearby an alabaster canopic jaw in which the prince's heart had been secretly concealed and buried among the possessions of a low-ranking priest long ago. On this night, the heartless prince has arisen. He seeks to reclaim his heart. Oh, beware. He draws near now, bandaged feet dragging through the soft, shifting sand. Beware, he comes. That's the mummy one. Okay. There's another famous one, so let me make sure I get this right. I saw the monster of Frankenstein's once, where others saw nothing but a loathsome, fearsome creature, a force of destruction and death. I saw only its suffering. It had been created from a body that had found peace in death, whose soul had found release, had been crudely stitched, rudely jolted by electrical force back into an appalling parody of life. I saw the tatters of its former self in the depths of its tormented gaze, pleading for release, the frightening awakening of its realization of what had been done to it, the dawning comprehension of its horror, and the ignition of its burning rage. Very good, Sue. Cool, so let's see. Now look like I'll be filling in again. So then Sue, again, taking a great job of writing something new for us today. And it does have sort of Stephen King theme because it does involve a scary clown. And it's an excerpt from a future book called Circus Rising by Susan Buffum. Invariably, a child would become separated from the adult, or adults would have brought him or her. He would know when it occurred by the frantic, raised voices of the adults calling the name of the child over and over again. With the casualness born of anonymity, and the certainty that beneath the costume recently, the yellow wig, white gloves, and long denim shoes, he was absolutely invisible. Snappy made his way to where a frantic middle-aged woman with straight mouse-brown hair graying at the roots, tucked beneath behind her thin ears, was calling, "Annie, Annie, where are you?" A roustabout stopped and asked her if she had lost something. "My granddaughter. I've lost my little granddaughter," the woman replied, wringing her hands in distress. "I just stopped to buy a caramel apple to bring home to my husband. It only took a few moments. I turned around and she was gone." "I'm sure she's around. Maybe she's wandered off to see the chimpanzees in their wagon." "What'd she look like?" "Oh, she's yay-high," she replied, indicating a height of about 3 feet. "Annie's a pretty little thing with a head full of corkscrew pale blonde curls. She's got big blue eyes. Cherubic is what she is. She looks like a little angel." This caught Snappy's attention. He had a particular interest in little angels. "What's she wearing, ma'am?" asked the roustabout. "A little light blue dress with a white collar, white ankle socks, and white sneakers. She has a blue ribbon in her hair that hasn't fallen out. She's always tugging at it, she is. I'll tell you what. You go stand by the main gate so we'll know where to find you. I'll get a bunch of the rouseabouts, yard hands, and whoever else I can find together, and we'll scour the grounds for little Annie. When we find her, we'll bring her straight to the main gate. We haven't lost a kid yet, not for long anyway. Oh, thank you so much. She's a very sweet girl. Tell her Granny is waiting for her. We've got to get this apple home to Grampy before he goes to bed. She stuck the apple into the bag she had over her arm and headed off toward the main gate, above which the rising circus banner was strung between two poles. Jack turned and glanced at the tall, lanky clown in the baggy black and white houndstooth suit and big blue bow tie. Hey, Snappy, we've lost a little girl. Want to lend a hand and help us look for her? When you find her, take her to Granny at the main gate. Got that? The clown nodded. Tell everyone you see, the sooner we find the kid, the sooner we can get this broken down hit the road. It's 100 miles to the next site. We'll be rolling into town as people are rolling out of bed in the morning. I for one, was looking for a couple hours of shut-eye. Right now, it don't look like that's going to happen. He walked off, shaking his head, calling to several of his buddies, gesturing and telling them to start looking for the little girl. Snappy turned and headed for the animal wagon. Kids like the big cats, the monkeys, the horses, the goats, ponies, elephants, and even the snakes. The menagerie was a magnet for the small fry. If little Angel Annie was there, he would find her. He was pretty sure he knew the child from having seen her when she arrived with the woman. The late afternoon sun had been caught in the child's curls, giving her the appearance of having a halo around her head. She had been illuminated, and he had been captivated by her beauty. Angel trapped on earth. He had to release her from his bondage in the earthly realm. That was his particular calling, to rescue little Angel that had fallen from the heavens and show them the way home. There she was, as if waiting for him, standing at the post. The big cat lounging in the straw, its large gold eyes watching the child, more curious than menacing. You like Maximus, he asked, as he came up alongside the little girl. He's a big kitty, she replied. I wish I could pet him. I'd like to pet him too, but he's too tired. You saw him doing all those tricks in the big tent, didn't you? She nodded. That was a lot of jumping from platform to platform and through burning hoops. He's tired now. It's his bedtime. She sighed. It's getting late. It must be close to your bedtime too. I'm not tired. Would you like to go to see the emu? What's that? She asked, looking up at him. It's a really big bird. It's so big you put a saddle on it and ride it like a two-legged horse, except it's got a very long neck and a beak. That's silly, she laughed. You can't ride a bird unless you're a fairy. Let's go look at him, and then you can tell me whether or not you can ride this bird. He held his gloved hand out to her. With the innocence and trust of the very young, she put her small hand in his, and he led her around the playground, past the leopard's way. Hearing voices, he steered her left past the sleeping lions. This way, he said. Keeping his voice low. We have to be quiet. Those big kitties are sleeping, she whispered. Yes, we mustn't wake them. They'll be grumpy and snarl at us. They wove through the cage wagons and then squeezed through a gap in the fruit fence around the menagerie yard. Where's this big birdie? She asked, as they started walking in the field beyond the fence. Over this way. He's even taller than I am. She glanced up at him, stumbling on the uneven ground. He grasped her hand and easily swung her up into the crook of his arm. She laughed. You're funny. Am I? She nodded, smiling at him. Why do you say that? Your flower squirts water. You squirted the lady clown right in the eye. I squirted in the eye every show. She never learns. Annie shook her head. She should put a handkerchief in her pocket. Probably should, he agreed, but it might not be so funny. You've got big feet. I do, but what do you think of my shoes? They're pretty big. As big as your grandpa's? No, bigger, lots bigger. They had reached the back of his wagon. He always parked his wagon the farthest from the others that he could. He had trouble sleeping. Noise bothered him. Other men snoring made him toss and turn all night. He liked the sounds of crickets and peepers. They lulled him to sleep. I could eat a cookie, he said. What about you? What kind of cookie? She asked. Chocolate chip. I have a peanut butter cookie? Let's see what's in the cookie jar. He opened the door of his wagon and quickly stepped up inside, pulling the door closed. "Ooh, it's dark in here," Annie said, her voice hushed. She had wrapped her arms around his neck and was holding on tightly. "I'll light the lamp." He found a box of matches and quickly struck them, the match head glaring brightly in the dark wagon. "I have to set you down now so I can light it." She nodded, and he put her on her feet. "Is this your house?" she asked, looking around at the tables and chairs, the cabinets, the little cook stove, curtains across the windows. "This is my home," he replied. "Sometimes a horse pulls it to the next town, or if we have to go a greater distance, my home goes on a black car and gets hauled by a train." She looked at him, wide-eyed with wonder. He stood looking down at her. He wished she'd thought to buy a roll of film for his camera in the town. A picture of her, this perfect little angel, would have been nice to have for his collection. For a few moments he considered waiting, buying the film in the next town and taking a picture. But the trouble was he hated the delay of sending the angels home. It was best to send them on their way quickly. "I'm going to have to help you get home," he said as he opened the wooden chest and took out an old, stained, but not threadbare towel. It had been laundered many times. The original sunny yellow now washed out to a lustrous sallow tone. "Are you going to take a bath?" she asked. "This is for you, so you don't get cookie crumbs on your pretty dress. Come and sit down here. I'll put this around your neck to catch the crumbs. You've got peanut butter cookies in the jar." "I believe I do." Obediently, she climbed up into the wooden chair. The clown lifted the lid of the circus elephant cookie jar on the table. "Here's your peanut butter cookie," he said, holding up the cookie he had removed from the jar. "Oh, goody!" She took the cookie and began to eat it, smiling happy as she looked around the interior of the wagon. Snappy moved behind her, his hand in the deep pocket of his baggy suit coat. "Look at the pretty stars painted on the ceiling. Can you find the Big Dipper?"